Welcome back to the SCC playoffs here for North America. Already through our second of the set today, or I guess technically our first one that is fully played through. We have Xibalba Storm and Athenian Sages be our next match up to see which of these two teams is going to move on and face up against the Valkyries as their opponent, the number one team, before they can get there. We still got to see how these two teams can kind of square off against this one. Again, it's myself, J-Mac, and Mifflin joining me here on the desk.
All day.
To kind of talk about this one. Yeah, we'll be here all day. You'll see some of the other casts rotating out, but it's going to be me and Mifflin here chilling out on the desk here on this Thursday of SMITE. And for North American, I think the thing that really kind of stands out to me from looking through the standings of phase number one, seeing how these rosters have really kind of changed over the course of time, is that there was a clear-cut 1 and 2 from North America. Everybody else kind of fell all in the same little parts here between everybody else. So really kind of having to see how the lower end of the SCC can kind of face off against some of those top-seeded teams a little bit later. I mean, you look over even at the Xibalba Storm and Athenian Sages, which will be our next matchup here in this group. Both these two teams, Athenian Sages only had a 2-3 record for themselves. Xibalba Storm 1-4 over their second phase. Now again, winner faces off against the Valkyries. Loser will play against Cat Club for their next matchup. We can actually take a look at the rosters, because as we kind of alluded to a little bit, at least for the Athenian Sages, that this is not the same Athenian Sages team. And even if you look over the course of phase number one, transitioning to phase two, and then from phase two throughout the individual weeks to here, this team has kind of been piecemeal together. They lost their jungler, Jangaru, who jumped up to the SPL, now Grave into this slot. They lost Privative, who was their support for this team, now Evermed stepping in there. And I believe DonutDoug joining this team at one point as well. So, I mean, this has been a team that has really kind of gone through the ringer of roster changes. It's taken them from what was one of the top, if not the top, NA SCC teams, now down here and fighting in that 4th seed spot here against the Xibalba Storm. Their roster, Tegveer, Ratmilk, Globe, Hapn, and Shipigami, rounding out theirs, have also had some difficulties just trying to find some success throughout their phase.
And that tends to be the case for the SCC. They're the feeders for the SPL. They generally step up. People have to step in or replace them or shift around within of itself. So I expect things to go still as we would have expected even 2 or 3 months ago between these two squads, just considering some of the tenured names that we see here. In particular, I'm really keeping my eyes on guys like Nayhoo. I've got high expectations for him in particular as one that has played very consistently at that SCC level over the last couple of years. Still certainly a lot of names you should recognize, even if there are a few new ones scattered amongst them.
Yeah, I think trying to figure out what these two teams' identity is going to be the big thing going into game number one here. We can kind of get ready to start up for the picks and bans soon between these two teams, Xibalba Storm and Athenian Sages. I'm curious as to kind of how their meta is going to develop over anything, just because we've already been seeing kind of how the general meta is, but sometimes you get individual players, individual members of these teams that like to do things just a little bit weird. We saw what Rundos was doing in the previous game, was running Jormungandr game one, wasn't the most successful, switched over to the Odin a little bit later on to try and counterpick. Looked all right, but up against the Emoji, it's maybe a bit tough, so we'll see if anything kind of shifts up here for game number one between the Sages and the Storm. Although if you take a look at the bans, nothing really is all that different here. Maybe seeing the Raijin in that first ban is probably the one difference that stands out, because it feels like, Mifflin, a lot of teams have just been letting the Raijin through. They say, okay, we've played against it a dozen times at this point, whether it be in competitive games or in our scrims. We kind of know how to deal with it, and so more and more teams are letting it through. So seeing the Sages ban it maybe is the most curious point at least out of these immediate bans.
And Raijin's had some of those adjustments recently as well that make him maybe a little bit less appealing, but I still think solidly within the top 5 mages in the game, and that probably puts you as solidly within like the top 5 picks in the game as well. So no surprise to me that Raijin is at least seeing a little bit of emphasis in the bans here. I think it's flavor of the week, what you want to play against, what you don't, and they decide that's the Raijin. Tycho Drum just a little bit too valuable. Anhur, Rat, and Thoth to round out the top 3 for the Sages. So you've got a really strong backline here, a laner in Anhur that you can rely on to hold his own, or even find some pressure, someone you can play through and perhaps look for some invades, leverage the global presence from Rat, all the while generating that threat on map, creating opportunities for Thoth to just hang back, do what mid laners do. God, I envy their job so much, J-Mac. Just sit there and lane, farm up, and then get themselves in that late game and start one-shotting some of their enemies. On the other hand, though, the Storm, aka or used to be the core of the Fun Havers, that's kind of their legacy, going with a much more eclectic composition, so sticking with that legacy, I suppose, here, even though it is almost an entirely different team. Aphrodite alongside Tsukuyomi kind of leaves some question marks in my mind. Where is the Tsukuyomi going? I generally think Thor is jungling, but we've seen Thor a lot in the solo lane. Does that put Tsukuyomi in jungle, Thor solo? Are we looking at Tsukuyomi mid? Kukulkan joining the draft does answer some of those questions, though.
Yeah, maybe Kukulkan towards mid, Tsukuyomi or Thor interchangeable in that jungle spot.
Let's get Thor solo.
We're going to call Thor solo?
I hope so.
We'll see if it's Thor solo. We'll see if it's Tsukuyomi solo. Ishtar to round out the composition. We saw a little bit of the EU with the Aphrodite and Thor as kind of a combo. Gave you a strong dual lane to kind of play through. The Thor once at level 5 hit. Got that extra form of immunity to keep those ganks going on over the dual lane. They're going up against, though, an Anhur Baron. Decent kill pressure, at least over in that dual lane spot here. And we'll have to see exactly how the Athenian Sages can adapt with all the changes they've made over the course. I think if I counted up correctly, somewhere around 4 or 5 roster changes from individual points over the course of week 1 of this phase all the way until now. So we'll see if the Sages can bring it all together. Can the Storm find some success? We'll throw it over into game number 1. To do so, we'll take it to our casters.
Thank you very much, JMac and Mifflin. Myself, Supersonic Blur, joined by Judas here. We'll be breaking this game down. And Judas, you have a doozy of a game for a chair 2 here, because Xibalba, I believe it was eclectic, was the complimentary term that Mifflin gave for what Xibalba Storm have given. What we're seeing from the Athenian Sages, like was mentioned, they've had a bit of a rough time this second split, find themselves in 4th seed, but their comp looks absolutely phenomenal here.
Yeah, one thing that I do need to draw attention to first is I was going to go all in on the mental damage passive of putting Snaddy's famous Thor solo against him. But no, it is actually Tegveer on the Tsukuyomi in the solo lane. Something I'm not really sure why we're even seeing it. I've got to be honest. I think lately we've been seeing assassins sort of come into the meta in the solo lane to punish these mage solos, but no mage solo to be spoken of. DonutDoug takes a ton of damage early on. Welcome to the game, Doug. But happy enough under that tower, of course. But yeah, this Tsukuyomi solo, not sure what it's going to really do here in the early stages. Might be okay up against an Amaterasu, of course, likes to farm up and not get too aggressive early on as well. So we might see some calmness over in that solo lane, you know, Tegveer and Snaddy chilling out, farming up, cup of tea and a biscuit as they just get set and prepared to rotate into the middle lane. But yeah, very curious to see this Tsukuyomi in action. Did see some changes, of course, but primarily around the jungle setup for them. So again, really interested in how it's going to go. And I mean, that's just one of the things I really want to keep an eye on, because as much as the composition is pretty cool and pretty eclectic, as was said from the Storm, it does all come down to how well they can pilot it.
It does, but for me, this thing is running down the list of what we're seeing item-wise. That is Shinigami looking for crit first item. Now, long time ago, Golden Bow used to be a crit item, so that would make sense, but long time since we've seen that. First item crit, that screams to me Xibalba want to get aggressive early here, and well, we saw a little bit of pressure out in duo lane. DonutDoug, like you mentioned, took a lot of damage. They've eaten some potions, but I haven't seen any fireworks or sparks yet.
Yeah, not quite yet. And one thing, again, have to draw attention to. Lots of Baron's Brew on the side of the Athenian Sages. Apart from the Baron himself, you know what they say, never drink your own stock. So not too surprising to see Evermed not go for that. But yeah, a lot of poking and prodding expected to come out from the Xibalba Storm dual lane. Hapn, of course, on this Aphrodite. The whole point of this Afro in this early stage is the amount of sustain and poke pressure you can put out. Evermed, of course, on the Baron does a similar job. So a lot of similarities from both supports. Maybe as we get to the later stages, we might see a bit of an advantage towards Evermed based on the fact that Life of Party, of course, is more of a team fight oriented ultimate. Hapn, of course, though, can help out whoever happens to need it. We'll see Tegveer, of course, going in with that piercing moonlight. Yeah, thank you, I am here all day. But Snaddy in some trouble.
Maybe not. Snaddy goes down to first blood. You were all here all day. Snaddy taken down for first blood. Some early aggression from these two assassins. That was Ratmilk basically just throwing out a wall. Everything else was just Tegveer's early aggression. We've seen Snaddy fall fairly low and get pushed back into the tower a couple of times here. This dual lane side, again, is a bit more of a slap fight. It's Christmas versus Halloween for the supports. And honestly, I know which one I prefer. But whether or not it ends up being the tail of the tape for these two, I mean, like you said, the more teamfight-orientated ult from Life of the Party, my problem is, though, is whenever we see these big teamfight ults from the supports that are all CC, Afro's whole thing is, hey, who's being CC'd? Oh, what's that? I'll pop my ult, and suddenly it's not a problem. That could be what ends up happening. As Grave again makes their rotation over towards this dual lane for another buff. Hapn gets CC'd hard, slowed and mowed down. The shell comes through and Shinigami goes ahead and gets in, but over the top, DonutDoug dives the tower, but gets body blocked in and falls.
Welcome to NA, everybody. This is how we do things here. Immediately, less than 4 minutes into the game, DonutDoug just diving in. Ratmilk takes to the sky.
Quick goal. Goes straight on in. Evermed CC'd out,
Nice.
and that's how you clean up a kill.
Oh, just like that. Like we said, welcome to NA. 4 kills in 4 minutes, and well, this is just how we're going to start this one off. But yeah, incredible play onto Hapn. That almost got out, did the Aphrodite, but it was just enough in the pocket for the Athenian Sages. But what a reaction from Shipigami. Takes the angle onto DonutDoug, which was the only way to take them out there. And yeah, manages to kill them off and gets a return kill as well for Ratmilk. So good start for the Xibalba Storm. It's hard to call the Athenian Sages favorites in this game because like we touched on earlier on the desk, the bottom 4 teams of the NASCC, all extremely tight, about 1 game between them all. So not too surprising to see such a close game. Whoa, Spirit of the Nine wins in response there from GIobe, not interested in playing around. More than happy to use that cooldown quickly. And as we saw last week, Blur, it is the Thoth versus Kukulkan mid lane. I'm not sure we're going to be seeing much else than that all week long.
Yeah, outside of those 2 gods being banned away, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. We've seen mages be incredibly powerful in the solo lane. Now we get to see that mages can still be incredibly powerful in the mid lane. So
yeah,
maybe mages are just incredibly powerful. Who would have thought?
I mean, that's where they're designed to go, intended to go. But of course, we'll have to draw back to last week for inspiration, of course, in the EU SCC qualifiers, because it seemed like teams really had to rely on these big game-changing ultimates from the mid lane. You know, we saw particularly Picorino last week on the Kukulkan, not just using it to secure objectives, but oh, look at the damage on Snaddy again.
Oh, and he caught the dash as well. Piercing Moonlight will only go through twice, but that's more than enough. Tegveer joins up again with Ratmilk to take them down. Athenian Sages have left Snaddy high and dry to live in the very solo lane. More appropriate that they're taking the buffs over on the left-hand side, but Xibalba Storm, they seem comfortable with it as well because they want to fight over in left and now twice in solo. Does the Athenian Sages, does Grave need to lend a hand to Snaddy there?
I mean, I'm not sure. Ratatoskr, of course, with that through the Cosmos, one of the best counter-engaged junglers, maybe equal so to Ratmilk on the Thor, but I touched on earlier, I'm not sure what Tegveer on this Tsukuyomi is going to do early on. Turns out it's just to kill Snaddy. You know, yeah, damage. That's pretty much it. Of course, like I mentioned, Amaterasu, one of those solo laners who is one that likes to sit in lane, farm up, and really rotate to the mid game and get online and have an impact then. But you know, I guess heavily punished by this Warrior's Axe start coming out from Tegveer. Already has the Runeforged Hammer as well. Eclectic doesn't even begin to cut it, but it seems to be effective nevertheless. And Ratmilk and Tegveer have dominated this right-hand side of the map. Left side still going in Xibalba Storm's favor, but not quite to the same level. And now I do wonder how well can Ratmilk transition this impact over onto either this left side or into the mid lane. We already saw 1 kill onto DonutDoug, but some more scrapping in this dueling.
A lot more scrapping, beads forced, and now Ratmilk's looking to try and re-engage on this. Hapn is able to survive through most of it. Ratmilk gets pulled back in from life of the party. They're still tower diving, they're still tanking this tower, but the sustain they're getting is just enabling them to gas pedal. But did they take too long? Graves over this side of the map, but the fight's just completely over. Xibalba Storm back away.
Well, just like that, Ratmilk impacts the other side of the map as well, and a real hesitation from the Athenian Sages so far to really fight back. You know, Graves sat over here, had the ultimate, didn't decide to use it and get over quickly, actually walked all the way over to the purple buff, and still didn't decide to ult. Now, of course, it looks like that was probably the right thing to do, but again, if just using it a little bit earlier. GIobe now getting involved in the action on this right-hand side. The harvest is good over here, so GIobe wants a piece of the action, and yeah, like you said, both side lanes now under big pressure. It starts from this right lane, converts over to this left-hand side. Nayhoo on the Thoth, relatively untouched though, and again has that very impactful high burst ultimate. So that is what the Sages are banking on, but what I do need to see is Grave getting a little bit more active from the jungle.
Right, because otherwise Athenian Sages, they're not going to get to a late game to try and get to parity here as Ratmilk's over this side. Evermed caught out by a wall, the wrong side of it though. so they will be able to disengage. But Ratmilk gets forced low. Grave now into the ultimate, goes up and down. They can't quite find the Thor who gets into the sky. Where will they land, though? Will they want to try and keep the fight going or not? There's a big rotation in. Ratmilk dunks in, looking to try and pull away some beads, but held very effectively there by DonutDoug, recognizing he ain't sticking around to do damage. GIobe made a rotation over this side as well, but they seem more interested in farming. Grave, though, still sniffing out for a bit of a fight. Serpent of the Night Winds is forced. And that should be the end of this.
Wow. Look, GIobe right now making a rotation all the way to right, then all the way to left, yet still keeping parity in the mid lane. If we were able to track the amount of distance covered, the Xibalba Storm might well be doubling the amount from the Athenian Sages right now. I have to point this out. I don't like to get into some players so early on in a cast blur, as Snaddy surely takes another spill under tower. Oh, never mind. Actually stays up this time. But how is it, Blur, that GIobe has made more rotations to the side lanes than Grave so far in the Ratatoskr? That surely cannot be happening if you're the Athenian Sages.
I mean, maybe not. Look, hey, hang on a minute. You've done that. You've done the musical chair thing. You've gone from chair 2 to chair 1. I'm supposed to be the one asking the questions.
Surprise!
don't be doing that to me. I was about to open up the whole book, start thinking up some ideas. No. I asked the questions here. You have to answer them and make me look smart for asking them.
But I don't have the answer, Blur. That's the only thing I can say. Look, Grave surely is waiting for some sort of power spike. Already has the Acorn fully upgraded, of course, possibly building into that Jotun's Wrath. I can see the Athenian Sages being okay with only being 3k gold down. It's not the most unreasonable lead, right? We do see this sort of gold difference happen. It does come up at these sorts of games. But how can the Sages come back into it is what I'm looking for. And like we've said, we need, or the Sages need rather, the Storm to pull one of these objectives like the Gold Fury, or possibly wait for this Pyromancer to come up. And then they need to try to steal it away with Nayhoo, with the use of Grave diving onto the backside. Looks like they're instead trying to get set up, but Grave takes, oh my god, too much damage.
Way too much damage. Trider goes up through the Cosmos, ends up with Shippigami tearing through their health bar. Now Ratmilk looking for follow-up damage. They find Nayhoo all alone. Beads have been used. Will they be able to throw enough damage? Man. The answer is no. Final judgment, more like a last writ there. Ratmilk did take a fair bit of damage, but even so, Hapn can happily heal them all up. 4 ultimates used, 2 kills for them. Unfortunately, though, they don't get the chance to look at that Gold Fury.
Well, that was the flip condition I was talking about. They need Grave to go in, they need Nayhoo to secure the objective. Fortunately, Grave went in a bit too early, and there was no objective pulled for Nayhoo to impact on. That's more of what we need to see from Grave, but I think recognizing the situation that they are down, that Ratmilk is 3 kills and 3 assists already on this Thor, just does a ton of damage. And you as a Ratatoskr can't possibly stand up to this. Actually gone for the Brawler's Beat Stick has Grave, so definitely concerned about the sustain potential coming out from this Aphrodite, and how that can impact fights later on too. So Grave has planned for the late game, and I'm expecting that's what the Athenian Sages are waiting for. It actually looks like they're now feeling confident to pull this Gold Fury, but the Xibalba Storm more than aware of it.
They are. Let's see whether or not the results come through. Both junglers going for their semi-globals. Around the back, Shippigami is pushed away. Athenian Sages do get their Fury, but Evermed tanked up too much and can't survive on the retreat. Nayhoo looking at half health, looking like a tasty snack. Gets caught out by the kiss and could be in trouble. Thankfully, though, Grave comes in with a great bit of peel. Nayhoo is able to disengage, but has Grave traded their life out? No! They all managed to get away with just losing Evermed. And I do say just losing Evermed, because look at those health bars.
Yeah, that was very, very close for the Sages, but the Storm can't find all of the damage they need. The Sages get the objective they were looking for. Still find themselves down a bit in gold. It's not quite the big recovery that they needed, but, I mean, look, I was looking for the Storm to pull the objective. The Storm opt not to, and the Sages see an opportunity with Oracles up too, in favor of the Storm. I'm not sure how the reaction was maybe quite so slow that we actually saw the ult coming out from Ratmilk. I think onto Nayhoo, but it didn't seem in time or to have any sort of impact. And, we had both solo laners hanging out over in the right-hand lane, not interested in making a big rotation over. It just meant that the Storm caught napping a little bit. Now it's not, again, the end of the world for the Storm. It's not, they still have a very solid gold lead to work with, and still have a level lead pretty much across the board. It's only the dual lane that's relatively equal, but Snaddy, we've seen this one before.
We have, but what we didn't see before is Snaddy get to dash away from it, and now just that little bit tankier, a little bit healthier, coming through with some of those items. Grave, oh my goodness, Grave has found their way over to the solo lane. In fact, actually almost every member from the Athenian Sages have come on through. Tegveer is the target right now. Piercing Moonlight buys them some CC immunity and a little bit of protection, but it's not much. Ratmilk, though, with a little bit of peel, might just be able to find Snaddy, but they're 1v4 in this situation. GIobe's rotation finds Nayhoo straggling in the jungle. There's no major threat.
No major threat just now. I do wonder if any objectives can be taken by the Sages in response. Looks like DonutDoug actually making a long rotation to the mid lane, but takes that very important mid lane tier 1 tower. And that's just created the space. The Sages in and out, pull this Pyromancer. Looks like the Storm aren't giving it up, though.
They're not. Out comes the Serpent of the Nine Winds. Doesn't find a home on anyone. Athenian Sages get the buff. And now they're looking for potentially a little bit more if they can. GIobe seems to be the main focus, or needs to be, really. Snaddy's the one who's finding the main force in. Even so, the rest of the team just disengages. And for what we were talking about, Xibalba Storm, oh my god, they're 2-8. It's incredible for them. They got so much pressure. Yeah, it was a 3k gold lead, and Athenian Sages take one good fight and 2 good objectives, and it's parity.
Yeah, look, it just evaporated like that. They get active on the map, do the Sages. We see Grave make a rotation all the way to the right-hand side of the map. And just like that, like you said, parity. Now, during all of that happening, we did see Shipigami basically strip the entire left side of the map of all of the farm that were there. Now, I do wonder if this Ishtar can get involved. Of course, gone for, you know, the eclectic style build, as we're seeing the rest of the Storm try to do here. Straight into that Wind Demon and the RC. Now going into that Executioner as well. This is an Ishtar that really wants to fight. Now, we haven't seen a whole lot of fighting yet from Shipigami. Understandably, of course, it's not easy to make that sort of rotation so early, playing a god like Ishtar, but now has the space to get involved. The map is wide open. Of course, the Gold Fury still down for a little bit, and everything on the side of the Athenian Sages lends itself to actually being a possible rotation now for Ishtar to actually group with the rest of their team and start fighting. I do wonder how impactful that's going to be, though, because who are they going to be fighting? You know, Grave, very likely to be getting on top of them. Snaddy still doesn't seem too interested in making any rotations, but has gone for a more damaging style build. So I do expect to see this Ishtar now try to throw their weight around a little bit. Xibalba Storm posturing around this Fire Giant, surely not trying to pull it, but it's drawing a reaction from the Sages.
A big reaction. They'll go ahead and grab out the beads. No, excuse that. That is the Magi's coming through from Hapn. Out through the Final Judgment. Doesn't find a home. Ratmilk goes on the back. They've pincered in on Nayhoo. Shi'Nigami's also over this side of the map. Trying to find it. GIobe is the target that these junglers are going for, but Tegveer takes down Evermed and can keep the chase going all onto Nayhoo. Piercing Moonlight closes the gap. The slows are there. The rest of the team is there. And Nayhoo is no longer there. With all the members around this side, DonutDoug has taken a page out of Shi'Nigami's book last time. I need to just split push. The rest of the team can take this Fire Giant. No problem.
What an awkward fight over there for the Sages. It felt like they had a window onto the Storm, but then nothing happens. Fire Giant's half HP, but 2 members of the Sages around.
Wait, GIobe is the one who backed. I thought GIobe was here. GIobe is the one who's got all the secure for this. Fire Giant's getting incredibly low. Graves around the back, looking for a blink in potential. Snaddy's low as well. There's the blink, but who's getting it? Xibalba Storm to just find themselves their Fire Giant that they had so desperately wanted. Serpent of the Nine Wind doesn't find home. Grave will be able to slip away from that one. Snaddy, not quite so lucky. Has to go back to base the long way, I believe. But a 17-minute Fire Giant comes through for the Xibalba Storm. Now they've got the wind in their sails again.
Look at the pace of this game. You just said it. 17-minute Fire Giant. There's 2 towers down on left-hand side and a Phoenix exposed. Another Gold Fury's about to go down. Hapn might have something to say about it, though. Sages will manage to secure that and get some gold back in their pockets. I feel like we're playing at an absolute lights-out pace at the moment. But who does that benefit? Right now, benefits the Xibalba Storm. They're the ones with this Fire Giant on their belts and ready to look to take down some of these towers. There's a lot of gold on the map still for this Storm to take back, because as much as that was a good split push from DonutDoug, That's a very important Fire Giant to go the way of the Storm, because it means now they can start to actually build a lead. We've had a sort of ping-pong style lead thrown back and forth. Right now, with these towers going down, maybe some more actually under Evermed.
Just a little bit. Pressured out from the tier 1 tower. The entirety of Xibalba Storm are just barreling down, spearheading their way through this. They've got a couple of minions in as well. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to get this one for free. Nayhoo trying to put out a lot of damage. And this is what we've seen so much come through from these Thoth kind of picks. It's that anti-siege potential and just siege potential. The long-range poke is so good.
Yeah, and it just doesn't stop, right? The Hieroglyphic Assault feels like it's back off cooldown all the time. Party Punch in the pocket as well for Nayhoo, so every single shot is just going to continuously chunk down the health bars of the Storm. But I believe that's why they might have gone for this Aphrodite pickup. We've seen a lot of focus beyond these Thoth ults that are nailing the backliners and taking down some of these carries or the mages. But the general poke that comes out from Thoth tends to hit these frontliners like Ratmilk or Tegveer will be doing. But I think having the Aphrodite to sustain you up through that, and like I said, Thor and Tsukuyomi very good at diving onto a Thoth. I do think actually they've got the tools to deal with that poke, but they still don't really have the tools to deal with a final judgment just one-shotting the backline. So a lot of pressure still onto Nayhoo. Haven't seen too much from this Thoth aside from this general poke, though. And I think we do need to see a little bit more involvement now. Of course, has that Spirit of Desolation online. Going into that Obsidian Shard now will start chunking down these health bars much more quickly. And of course, it is a Tsukuyomi that is built very tanky for the Xibalba Storm, but it's not a particularly tanky god. So I think there are still opportunities there if they can lock down this Tsukuyomi, who doesn't have the normal type of solo laner escape ultimate where you can just sort of, you know, like we saw from Jormungandr in first game of the day, can just kind of get out of there. That's not something that Tsukuyomi can do. If they're using that Piercing Moonlight, will commit them to that fight. So for the Sages, it's all about getting these fights done quickly, but making sure it is on the target you're looking for. The Storm just need to play this composition well. Play it slowly, use the sustain, and pick apart the Athenian Sages.
And that's what they've been doing so far, as we see this Fire Giant starting to wear itself down for the last little bits of time. They've still got a little bit of time on it, not a whole lot. They might be trying to go for one last hurrah in this mid tier 2 tower. They've got themselves a little bit of a lead. That said, it's barely 1,000 gold.
Great.
So as a big fight starts to go in, it's Snaddy who's leading the charge. Finds 2, Serpent of the 9 Winds. Buys a little bit of time, and now it's the re-engage. Athenian Sages just stepped out of base a little bit too far, out of the comfort zone. And as a result, that means the Xibalba Storm are able to find one. Not a whole lot of purchase there for the final judgment. And like you said, as long as there's a health bar at 1 HP, Afro will put that to 100% HP. Snaddy takes a little bit of a fight with Globe. That mid-Phoenix goes under a little bit of duress, but more importantly, Fire Giant is off. Athenian Sages can finally take a breath.
Yeah, the Storm managed to get their main goal. All along, they've been looking at that tier 2 mid tower and do finally manage to take it down. Like you said, the Aphrodite can sustain up through the poke coming out from Thoth. And yeah, unfortunately for Nayhoo, final judgment off the mark there. Funnily enough, Globe, also with the Spirit of the 9 Winds, been off the mark pretty consistently as well. I do wonder how different this game would look. Yeah, I mean, it's zoning for one thing. If it, even might hit someone, but I mean, these have been quite far off so far. I think when these ultimates do start connecting, now we are in this late game stage, that will be when the game really starts to turn. You can go for a Hail Mary play like this if you're the Athenian Sages, but don't really have the damage, and Tegveer spots it out.
They do, but how quickly can the Xibalba Storm get here? They're running as fast as they can. Thor's going up, but it might already be done by the time they get there. No, it's stolen away.
Wow.
What got that? It doesn't matter. Ratmilk's around the back. Tegveer follows through as well. Whirlwind coming through from the Kukulkan. That's what they're there for. And now Shipigami comes in with a huge Blades of Retribution. Cuts out 2, picks up 1. 3 members go down. The Athenian Sages go for the Hail Mary. Cool heads, and it comes up tails.
Now the Storm want to end this game quickly, barreling in to this Phoenix. Snaddy under even more pressure yet again. Still 19 seconds on to Nayhoo. Thoth with no ultimate. Looks like the Storm are going for it.
I mean, they can do. Graves only just now gone back to base. Snaddy goes for the dazzling offensive, but eats most of their health in response. Now we'll have to try and back to base. Meanwhile, the Titan's getting whittled down lower, and that's going to be game one. Bottom seed punching up against the Athenian Sages. 23.5 minutes. They make it look clean.
Blink and you miss it, Blur. Complete juxtaposition to the first set of the day. A completely different style. It was, high octane action from the Xibalba Storm at the start. Then they sort of gave it all away to the Athenian Sages, who take it all back. And then we flipped the script all over again. It was only 23 minutes. I feel like I've watched an entire character arc come out from the Xibalba Storm. Like you said, bottom seed punching up. Looked pretty good there. Did not look like a bottom seed, and I do wonder what they'll bring to game number 2.
I am certainly looking forward to that as well. So if you want to go ahead and grab a drink, check your posture, do all that stretching stuff that keeps you in good form, go do that now, because we're going to a break, and you do not want to miss this next game.
Well, we've been lacking a little bit of pro content. Well, you can make sure you go over to SMITE Pro over on YouTube and catch some of that action that you may have been missing out on as far as kind of the behind-the-scenes look at with the pros. We have a recent series that's been starting up here with our Road to Worlds retrospective. We take a look at all the teams that are qualifying upwards towards Worlds, or even for some of them trying to still get to Worlds, and kind of get a look back on how their season played out. We just put out one for the Jade Dragons. We've already got one for the Hounds and the Gladiators as well. So make sure you go over to youtube.com/SmitePro to watch on the retrospectives or any of our other behind-the-scenes content. We've got Dev Insight for whenever we just released a new God Baka Kujira. We've got the recaps. That was the word I was looking for. We've got the recap videos from any of our SPL weeks, or if you missed out on last week, you can catch out on which teams qualified there. All that and more. Again, youtube.com/SmitePro and Smite VOD if you want to watch any of the matches that you may have missed from last week, or anything if you might miss something this week and you can go back and watch through. Game number 1, you might have missed it because it was complete opposite of what we saw in game number 1, though, Mifflin, where set number 1 of the day was 40, 45 minutes almost every single game. This one was quick and decisive from the Xibalba Storm, and a lot of it off the back of their jungler, Ratmilk.
Yeah, it's Ratmilk's world. We're just living in it, and you should be thankful for every breath you take here that Ratmilk allows it to happen, because that guy absolutely controlled the pace of this game, man. I loved everything I saw from him. I'd called for Thor out of the solo lane, because that's generally where we see him. If Ratmilk's on the map, just give him the Thor every single time. The wall placement, the presence on map, the counter gank potential was all there. So many of these fights is just Ratmilk in first, and even if Shinigami is going to be the one getting the kill, we know who started that one off. And I'd be surprised if we saw any clips where that wasn't immediately followed up by a Thor dunk or a Thor wall happen every time so far here. Athenian Sages just weren't quite able to figure out how they wanted to address that global presence. It felt like, to me, Gray was trying really hard to get things started on his own, and he'd go in with that ultimate pretty consistently, and he'd usually find a pretty good target, and then they'd both get dunked by Ratmilk, right? So there was always that counter initiation that Ratmilk was just prepared for. The follow-up from Globe was perfect. Hapn was linked up to him more often than not, allowing him to go for these hyper-aggressive plays, and hyper-aggressive, I think, perhaps just the name of the game here for Xibalba Storm top to bottom. It's a double assassin composition. Continue to just W key the entire time, and looks good for it. Had the early game been a little bit more tumultuous for them, which I'm sure that's exactly what the Athenian Sages would have preferred had they been able to play through their aggressive duo lane, I could see this composition from the Storm running into issues, lacking in front line and consistent CC, but there are no problems that you can't solve if you just hit harder and more often than your enemies, and that's exactly what the Storm do.
Xibalba Storm finish out their game. I believe it's only 24 minutes roughly of play for them to close out game number 1. Take a lead here over the Athenian Sages. Ratmilk 8-0-5 on the Thor. 15,500 damage for him. 4-1-4 for Tegveer. So the double assassin over in the right lane, and really made it difficult for Snaddy more than anything to kind of get anything going on the Amaterasu throughout the early game, and then by the time you get the Ama to level 20, be able to have the chance to upgrade some of those starter items, get those builds online. They're already a bit too far behind to really be able to make that same level of impact. So now for the Athenian Sages, it's adaptation. What do you do to slow down the momentum of the Xibalba Storm? Do you ban away the Thor? Do you ban away the Aphrodite to kind of take some of that combo? Do you just ban them both and say, okay, that's just too much in one basket to deal with? What's some of the ideas, at least for you, to be able to slow down this team?
If I'm on the Storm, my entire idea is, or excuse me, the Sages, is play our own game. That was not a game where you look at it and say, this pick is exactly what happens. I think it came down to play on field and pacing, and once momentum was on the side of the Storm, they tend to run with it. So I think just play your own game, stick to your own guns. If they ran back the exact same composition, there's no guarantee that the Storm are going to win out as consistently as they did in Game 1. Maybe if you want to direct anything, I think the Thor ban that the Sages do elect to go towards, probably the only adjustment I would have made in that first 3, but it does allow in some pretty strong picks.
Yeah, Poseidon as a first pick for Xibalba Storm, who is one of the top performing mages from the solo lane towards the tail end of SPL and in towards the SPL playoffs, and even throughout last week's SCC. But then you do give up the Raijin to the opposite end. That's kind of the giveth and taketh. You get a strong god, and you kind of give one over to the other team, as well as this Anhur over the dual lane, which has been kind of the biggest consistent factor. It really felt like Vapor's Coast kind of brought this god back to the forefront, showing the SPL, like, hey, this is how good this god is, this is what we can do on it, and everybody else starting to kind of follow suit with that pick now.
I mean, Anhur is just, and I've said this a lot, I've gone on record plenty of times saying this, not even speaking to his strength, probably the best designed MOBA character of all time. I just love how his kit flows into itself, It synergizes so well with itself. Impale, the space control of Pillar, having a standard leap means that you're a very versatile all-rounder pick regardless. CC immunity, the ultimate. Anything you could really want from Anhur you get from an ADC, excuse me, barring a stim. In the absolute latest portions of any match, a standard hunter that's got some sort of attack speed stim is generally going to outscale that Anhur. It's just that Anhur's going to get late game first because of the amount of pressure that he puts out. He absolutely controls the duo lane with immense kill pressure, has all-in potential on his own, can secure his own kills thanks to Desert Fury, and that'll generally, even if it doesn't kill someone or send them back to base in a body bag, you're going to have to go back to base with the B button to regenerate HP, and you're going to lose out on some of that farm, slow down your own game, and that is the primary strength of Anhur. He just expedites the pace of the duo lane for his own team while simultaneously slowing down the enemies.
Well, if we want to talk about gods and get in there and get active, it feels like the entirety of the Athenian Sages is that embodiment of the W key style of team. Raijin Thunder Crash into the middle of team fights, though, looking like it's going to be coming from mid, so not going to be as tanky as its solo lane counterpart. Instead, it's Kukulkan and Charon to round out the draft of the Athenian Sages. Charon, we've been seeing a lot of kind of at the pro level, has had mixed success in that support role. Kukulkan's one we really haven't seen a whole lot of. Not many warriors that we've been seeing as of recent, but it feels like it's been ages since we've really seen this Kukulkan kind of come to the forefront. It was time when like King Arthur was a meta. It was you pick one or the other kind of deal. So we'll have to see what the Athenian Sages can do with this bottom two pick. Can they stop the Xibalba Storm and take us to game 3, or will it be a 2-0 shutout for the Storm? Let's jump right into game number 2.
Thank you very much, J-Mac. Mifflin over on the desk. We're back once again for another breakdown of the set here. And the Athenian Sages, I said it last game, they got some absolutely fantastic looking picks. Their team looks phenomenal. Xibalba Storm had a slightly more eclectic look, but now, Judas, they've got themselves the Kukulkan, they've got the Poseidon. We just saw how good a Humbatz can be on some kind of plays that they can make. Xibalba Storm, they're certainly not exactly looking too worse for wear.
Yeah, they're looking like they are happy enough with how things have gone, of course. So we're going to see a big change up now in the type of styles that we're seeing. Of course, we're seeing our Chaos side with much more of a frontline presence, with the other side, the Xibalba Storm, looking for that more flavor of the month style, right? Say flavor of the month, it has been quite some time, but bringing the Poseidon into the solo lane, having the Kukulkan in the mid lane. The Xibalba Storm are not messing about when it comes to objectives. The Athenian Sages should not even consider pulling a mid camp if there is a Xibalba Storm mage on the map. It's just not going to happen. At least you'd think, given the history of Poseidon's Krakens, maybe we are just going to be looking at Globe on this Kukulkan as well. Of course, secured the Fire Giant in the previous game with a Whirlwind, so it doesn't need the big ultimate to get it done. But like I said, juxtaposition of styles here going to be completely opposite when we get to that mid lane. I think when we see these mid game full-on 5-on-5 fights, I think the Athenian Sages in game number 1 maybe felt a little bit outpaced in the draft, so they've gone for something with that little bit of higher pace about it, so they can start getting active earlier on.
And they have, and Shippigami again going for this first item of the dagger tree. They didn't get the crit online super early, which kind of surprises me. It's like, because they went straight into the RC and then into the Executioner and then third item, Wind Demon. Would it not just be worth picking up one of those items before, or is the power that good?
I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it's being considered by many. If you're an avid Gilgamesh player and you end up with the short sword first item, you are cursing the game, because that is widely considered to be the worst tier 1 in the game. Globe. Beads forced and under some pressure already. And I guess, we talk a lot about ADCs needing to pick up power spikes. I guess Shippigami is just going for the straight up power trough early on and just wants this to be the weakest point of the game. I don't know, but I suppose it does get your crit online a little bit quicker later on. And look at this big scrap in the dual lane already, but just trading blows both sides.
It is, but this time Hapn isn't on that gas pedal of the Aphrodite to be able to keep them all going with the sustain. I mean, sure, they can help push the wave harder with that blessing that they give, that they don't get last hits, but even so, Hapn really can't let Shippigami take this much damage, because it is noticeable damage here, and Shippigami does not have much sustain to their name. Evermed goes in aggressively again, but this is what Mifflin mentioned on the desk there. Anhur may not be the best late scaling, but he will bully you out and get to late game first. And we can see already here just how that's happening.
Yeah, it's interesting because Heimdallr is normally a god you would pick when you're at least happy to bully in the lane. You know, if you want to put some pressure on maybe a more late game god while being quite safe yourself, that's something you would pick up Heimdallr for. But of course, going into the Anhur can immune out the knockup from that disperse with the Gjallarhorn, so it's a reasonable pickup in response. But of course, like you mentioned, no death's toll and crit currently being built for Shichigami means that they don't have a whole lot of damage to fight back with or sustain in the kit. So looking to go into this mid-game 10-minute stage a little bit behind DonutDoug, but of course, you know, with the Through the Realms available to them, because another CC immune ultimate, again, has the Gjallarhorn to immune knock-ups and knock-backs, such as from the Impale. I can see why this would have come through, and yeah, you know, I don't hate it. It's something that Xibalba Storm would have been expecting looking at the drafts. If Athenian Sages want to play faster, they want to play early, they want to get this Kukulkan in the solo lane more involved, then you can bank on Shichigami at least trying to get that space to come online later on, and then have their impact as we start to move about the map more.
Talking about moving about the map, level 5s are starting to come online for a lot of these members. Everyone now with the ultimate available to them. Ratmilk, definitely the most impactful ultimate, just like running down the list. The massive, great big circle sets up absolutely everything else. Still no option for... Usually, I'm okay with these junglers being like, I don't want to ult yet, I haven't got CDR. I don't think there's going to be too much of a need for the anti-heal. So, expecting that Jotun's first, and then it's the go button.
Yeah, when we see that Jotun's come out, that's when, and there it is, we'll expect to see Ratmilk start getting active. We've seen a lot of success for home Batz already in this tournament. There's Desert Fury comes out from DonutDoug all over this shield buff. Gets counted out with that Dharmic Pillars, but it does not matter. It is all posturing for the Athenian Sages. They're getting their small leads that their comp is designed to give them. Still looking to loop around is Evermed, but I mean, there's no cue for Grave to go in. I do wonder what the reaction will be like from the Xibalba Storm.
Not sure yet, but I love the way that Grave is playing this. They've been playing around the corner. They are waiting for a response. They know they need to find Ratmilk, and they do so. They'll force out the ultimate, but in response, both come in. The turnaround from the Stygian summon is so good. Grave gets their first blood. Mark that one off, and the Athenian Sages with a beautiful turnaround. Now they just need to get out from here. There is the rotation in from Globe, but even so, it's just going to get the med, and that is it.
Globe
is it that it, though?
Drops the Spirit of 9 wins. Michael Drums traded out. That's going to be one fight. Oh my god, there's still a fight on left.
They're still going in. Are we sure that it wasn't right? Xibalba Storm should have been on solo on the order side.
My god.
Because, I mean, look at the way this is going. You know what? I'm just gonna quote you. Welcome to NA. Checkers with a sledgehammer time. There's a little bit more precision that has been going through, but Grave is so low. And with Dharmic Pillars coming back up, Ratmilk gets credit for the kill purely because that's how Ganesh works.
All right, let's recap. Athenian Sages, great fight. On to Ratmilk, catch them with their abilities down. Great use of the Through the Cosmos from Grave to counter out that Fear No Evil coming out from Ratmilk. Excellent use of prediction. Combine that with Evermed. Throw in that Summon Sticks to the path where Ratmilk was going to escape. Fantastic play. And then they just stick around. And they're just still there when there's more fighting going on. Ratmilk actually dies, has a respawn timer, respawns, and walks back to the fight and is able to pick up a kill with the help of Hapn. I think the Athenian Sages need to play this fast-paced style exactly the way they have, and then know when it's time to call it quits. It's, you know, a comp you need to maybe get used to. Maybe the Athenian Sages aren't used to playing at this type of pace, but that's what they need to do when it comes to fighting Ratmilk. Of course, Grave on the Ratatoskr always going to be defeating Ratmilk. No milking going to be happening here, but they need to, like I said, know when to call it quits, know when to turn a good fight into an objective call. And if they can do that, they have the composition to, you know, really solidify themselves a solid lead.
And as it stands with the lead, it's 100 gold after all is said and done. One thing we didn't get to really look at there was Tegveer again putting a lot of pressure in on Snaddy. Snaddy ends up falling in a complete solo kill, as Snaddy The whole point of this Kukulkan is designed to kind of body the mages, has been bodied themselves. Frostbound Hammer first item, I'll let you break that down on if you want to, but we might not get the chance as Evermed gets CC'd a little bit. With 3 members around, I thought there might be the go trigger, but instead, Xibalba Storm playing a lot more intrepid in this position. Doug could be teleported to by Ratmilk, but instead they'll just hold it out. I believe they actually still stole that one away from under Evermed's gaze. So it's just a little bit more farming now. Go ahead, break something down.
All right, I'll take a look at Snaddy on this Frostbound Hammer. Of course, wants to be sticky, and one of the best ways to do that is to just slow down your enemy. Mystical Mail, not a particularly popular item at the moment. So Snaddy, of course, doesn't want to pick that up. Look at the activity, though, for the Sages on this left-hand side.
They're coming in. Graves caught in an awkward spot. Will get into the sky before Serpent of the Nine Wind comes down. And now it's just a disengage. This is all over a purple buff, mind you. Is now looking for a disengage. Everyone from Xibalba Storm tries to chase, but Doug's slow is good enough to keep him going. But there's a little hint of a turnaround. The Athenian Sages don't want to show their back for too long. And now it's Xibalba Storm trying to go for the counter in here. Shippigami picks up Evermed. Good turn here. It's a 2v3 situation, but Evermed's round. There's Summon Sticks. It's good for a bit of a fear, and it pushes everyone away. But even so, Fear No Evil will get these members away. Nayhoo's rotation is here. And these are all just for small buffs. Xibalba Storm wanted to try and make something of the deficit in ultimates, but can't find anything.
Just squaring up non-stop are these two teams. Like I think great play from the Sages to recognize they got the purple buff, but the reaction is too strong from the Storm. Let's get out of there. Then the Storm completely overreact, try to contest it with another purple buff fight, and end up expending so many ultimates. 8 ultimates down off the board for not really a whole lot gained. Of course, that does mean that the Gold Fury will still be standing for some time. No one really able to make eyes at that yet, but both these teams now need to calm things down just a little bit. There seems to be a lot of excitement in the comms. Everyone really wants to be the one to make the big play, drop the big ultimate, but we've seen plenty of really impressive Hunbat's ultimate so far, so Ratmilk really shouldn't be burning that cooldown in a place they don't really need it. It stops Evermed giving chase in the boat, and okay, fine, it maybe protects someone, but there really wasn't a whole lot happening there, because they should have known. Already a lot of ultimates expended on both sides, so both sides reeled in just a touch. I don't want to bring this all the way back to an EU style, God forbid, but I do think everyone needs to really check their priorities. And, again, with this purple buff coming back up on both sides, make sure they are taking the wins they need and not going for anything more than that.
Yeah, there's a fun little expression. If you keep butting heads like this, all you'll both end up with is a concussion. And that's kind of how it's felt here. Is 11 minutes in, both these teams now, they're back to the farming going, let's not go for a fight that's not going to go either way for them. So instead, it's just farm up where they can, get what they can. Gold lead, completely negligible here. Kills do not seem to matter at this point in time. So if this game does sort of peter out towards a later stage, I gotta look at the Xibalba Storm, because the team fight again last time was a little bit in favor of the Sages. They built for late game. Xibalba Storm have such a good look for it. As Grave goes in, looking for Ratmilk around the back, forces the ult defensively. Grave has a little bit of support coming through from the Summon Sticks, used late, but Grave is out from this fight. Not much health left remaining for them. So the rest of the team starts swarming around multiple members from Xibalba Storm. Shippigami is low, but even so, it's just a wash.
Look, these team fight ultimates that you've mentioned from the Xibalba Storm can work fantastically well together. But we gotta start seeing some of these Spirit of the Night Winds connecting. I've seen plenty thrown from good angles by GIobe over walls and everything, but really not in conjunction with anything that Hapn can provide. They're not being used on top of Adamic pillars, not being used lined up with a Fear No Evil. And if the Xibalba Storm are going to make this comp work, they need these big ultimates to hit. Now, they do have a backup big ultimate on the right-hand side of the map with Tegveer and this Poseidon. But, of course, Poseidon wants to build this more tanky style, has the Pythagorean piece and that Breastplate of Determination already built up. And you're looking for the more consistent damage to come out from this Poseidon, rather than that big game-changing ultimate. So we do need to see more consistency from GIobe. Has gone for that Breastplate of Determination themselves, so okay, while these ultimates have not been hitting, they're at least going to be up frequently enough that you can have multiple bites of the cherry, or at least save that ultimate for a potential objective steal, right? If you're just going to be blasting it down these corridors willy-nilly, it's really not going to pay off for you.
It won't, but I love this change-up, like you mentioned from Globe. Looking at this comp, Grave wants to try and dive in on them, Snaddy wants to try and dive in on them, and we've seen this kind of play from Paul a lot in SPL, where it's like, I don't really care. If I get to live longer, my abilities go off more often. If they go off more often and they hit home, I technically do more damage. So it's a damage item if you really think about it.
Exactly. Of course, combines
and it's Kukulkan.
Yeah, combines well with the Kukulkan passive. Already has that Book of Thoth passive as well. So just churning that mana into damage here. So Globe, of course, will still be hitting hard. It looks like they'll be going into that Staff of Mirthin as well. So expect some big damage numbers. If we get to see it connect, please, Globe, I believe in you. You can do this. You have all the setup you need. Exactly. All the setup is there. You just have to be calm with it and make sure you're just connecting with someone. It doesn't even really matter who. If that Spirit of the Night Winds is connecting with Evermed on the Charon, it then sets up a target for the rest of the Xibalba Storm to focus on too. And, Evermed was able to roll away from danger if they needed. Oh, speaking of danger.
Whoa. Yeah, a lot of damage in on Globe. Beads are forced and they'll take the fight. Meanwhile, Xibalba Storm are trying to use this because they know Doug is low enough to follow it through. Ratmilk will be the one who kicks out DonutDoug. Meanwhile, Grave finds Globe in the mid lane. Like the fight from Xibalba Storm, they realize, hey, we ain't getting to Globe. Let's try and make something happen over on the left-hand side. They do grab Doug, so it's a 1-for-1 trade out across the map. But even so, Athenian Sages, they've knocked down that tier 1 in mid, which means they have a better perch towards this Fury.
Yeah, they are looking to get it set up. They are now, hold it, Grave and Evermed, fully aware of the situation. Now, Shippigami, not the healthiest. And yeah, that is enough for the Xibalba Storm to be dissuaded from pulling this objective. Grave, though, complete change up from game 1, really wants to go for it.
He does, but gets knocked up and just controlled in CC, but Shinigani's health bar is too low. Ratmilk blinks on back in to try and buy some time, but Snaddy's rotation is here, and Shinigami gets taken down by the Gay Ball. Barbed Spear of Mortal Pain. Good work from Snaddy there. Tegveer not making the rotation in. Instead, opting to just go ahead and push as much farm down as they can. But with the Athenian Sages starting to look for a group up here, Snaddy's recognized, hey, I can't beat Poseidon, so let me just go and try and beat someone else.
Yeah, and Snaddy making great use of that blink, had literally just bought it, but what the heck is going on here? Snaddy gonna sniff this one out. This is a full commitment, though, from the Storm.
It is. They pulled out some ults. Grave is here looking for it. Snaddy's in. Serpent of the Nine Winds doesn't secure it, but they do get themselves the Fire Giant. Little bit awkward timing-wise, and now they're just trying to keep Globe alive. Globe will get shoulder bashed down by Snaddy, but it should be a response of a kill on their own. Summon Sticks is used as a 2-for-1. Absolutely great work there from Xibalba Storm, recognizing we can just do this.
Yeah, they can just do it. They have Poseidon to shred those defenses of the objective. They have the secure from Globe or the secure from Tegveer. Either one, take your pick. It really does not matter. And I'm honestly surprised we didn't see an objective pull earlier from the Storm. But if you're going to do that, why not save it for the Fire Giant? And yeah, an even earlier Fire Giant than we saw in game number 1. And the Sages will really be kicking themselves over that. Only able to pick up Globe on the chase down there. Really unfortunate. I thought there was maybe an opportunity for a steal, but in that situation, you're not really looking for a steal if you're the Sages. And this is a lesson for everyone at home. If the other team just out-secures you, you have to expect that they are going to do that. So then you need to look at the fight. Who is tanking the Fire Giant? Who has been committing all of their abilities and all of their damage onto it? Those will be your targets to go for it. But it looks like Snaddy maybe caught in two minds a little bit there over exactly which target to go for. That means Grave has a problem in that they don't have the backup of this Kukulkan. Of course, used a lot of their abilities just to get to the fight. And yeah, I mean, the Xibalba Storm sneak one away. The Sages will be unhappy about it, but still managed to maintain parity for the moment.
Graves up, goes back on down, but there's the ultimate in response from Tegveer. There's Beads, Aegis used, and Whirlpool might be enough. Grave just about makes it away. A lot invested in, but they'll pick off one from Tegveer. And this Fire Giant isn't really being used in the same way we normally see it, where it's like, oh, we got Fire Giant, let's all group up, push down Phoenixes, get ourselves a bunch of gold. This is being used as a, all right, we just got something on the map. Like, this is farming as normal, just they've got Fire Giant.
Yeah, Shippigami with 3 buffs around the belt. It's like a season 1 Heimdallr somehow. Anyway. Yeah, but like you said, having this Fire Giant at this point, you're not using it to win the game or even open up the base like you'd normally consider. Because it was a snuck away objective, and the Xibalba Storm didn't even have a lead going into that situation. All they needed for now is to... Yeah, it's a very even game despite the big objective and the extra Gold Fury going the way of the Storm. But they are, like you said, using it to push down some towers. Have finally taken a tier 1 tower off the map because the Sages already winning in that tower battle. And it's just extended this game quite some time and maybe gives the Athenian Sages more chances to fight in around these objectives. And actually, you know, we'll see some more like this onto Evermed.
Whoa, Evermed just gets CC'd and deleted from the game. Like you said, it doesn't matter who the target is. Just set up a good bit of damage. Doesn't use the Serpent of the Nine Wind Globe, but instead just dumps the rest of the kit in on them. And with that, they've got 5 members looking to push up this mid-Phoenix. No, I'm still thinking of the Fire Giant. It's a tier 1 tower that Athenian Sages are trying to hold on to here. Hapn getting controlled a fair bit. Tegveer as well. Just getting deleted as DonutDoug takes down one, but Grave gets fallen by the Serpent of the Nine Winds at the very end of it. Snaddy's health bar takes a beating, but his heart will also keep beating. As Globe beats Aegis. DonutDoug is the one leading the charge here. Around the back, Ratmilk finds one, and it's all now on for DonutDoug to do what they can, but they do not have the damage for this one, so they will fall.
Nice. Everyone remembering who they are for a moment. The NA players all want to fight, and Blur wants to make some puns. Ratmilk needs to remember that Snaddy does some damage, and will actually just about get to safety. But that is the use of the Fire Giant there in full extent. That's what the Storm can do. They maybe weren't expecting such a big fight back, though, from the Athenian Sages. We do see a great taunt coming out from Nayhoo onto Hapn, locks them in that tier 1 tower, and, you know, despite being a Ganesha, you still can't tank that many shots. But we also get to see Globe connecting with the Spirit of the Nine Winds at max range right before Grave was able to get to the sky. Like I mentioned in game number 1, when those big ultimates start hitting, the game looks completely different. If Grave gets up there, re-engages onto the Xibalba Storm, we could be looking at, you know, a wipe from the Sages side, maybe even a tier 2 tower, and then all of a sudden the Sages have what they need to look at this next Fire Giant. Instead, we're again at this semi-parity, slight lead for the Xibalba Storm, and they are now the ones getting set up around this Fire Giant. I do wonder if the Storm are happy with how this game's going. It's been very chaotic and quite scrappy at times, but I think with the composition that the Sages have gone for, with Snaddy on this Kukulkan and, of course, the Ratatoskr in the sky, a scrappy fight should benefit them.
And that's what they've been looking for. They've been hiding around corners. In fact, they're just going to try and brute force this one down. There's a Deathbringer online for Shippigami. Will do a fair bit of damage. Snaddy's around the back. Finally gets through some good CC. Xibalba Storm grab themselves the Fire Giant late again. But the fight's going the way of the Athenian Sages. Snaddy takes down Shippigami, and the health bars are getting low on key members of Xibalba Storm. Most importantly, though, is Ratmilk not being targeted down. They're able to find DonutDoug and gets a double kill around the back. It's a 3-for-1. Snaddy and Evermed, the only ones remaining, looking to put out as much damage as they can. But Hapn just controls the CC far too well. Watch that fight. Watch Snaddy try and beeline towards the back line. He's just unable to do anything but left click and hold W.
Fantastic play from the Storm. Again, pull that big objective, get the secure from Globe. It's not even a contest this time. It immediately, they create the space they need, they have the DPS, and then it's all about the fight afterwards. Now, I mentioned a scrappy fight might benefit the Sages, but partway through that fight, the Xibalba Storm managed to disengage far enough that it actually spreads out all of the attention of the Sages. Nayhoo ends up completely isolated on the right-hand side. It suddenly means that Ratmilk can just dive on them, solo them down. Then we have the space created for Tegveer to just chase down Evermed. All of a sudden, Snaddy, completely isolated 1v3. Now Kukulkan has the damage within the kit to take all of them down, but just doesn't have the space to do it. The lockdown coming up from Hapn was great. The amount of rotations of abilities that Xibalba Storm were able to get off of there, absolutely fantastic for them. And now, they are the ones in the really commanding position. I just mentioned we were at a semi-parity. That has now blasted off to a 7,000 gold lead in favor of the Order side. And they've still got 3 Tier 2 towers standing to eventually work their way down. It looks like the Storm have calmed things down from the early game. They are now taking much better control of this. And the Sages are going to have to find a place to battle back because everything's not been going in their favor so far.
It hasn't, and the worst part is unlike that tier 1 defense where they were able to hold out parity and fight back, that was an even-ish game. That was a position that Athenian Sages recognized we don't have to give this up. If they try and fight the exact same way, Xibalba Storm already have they've got like that extra ace up their sleeve in the Fire Giant, the extra items online, finished up starter items coming online, even runic bombs just to burn this down just that little bit faster. Everyone on the Athenian Sages still has a recipe. The only reason why one member of Xibalba Storm doesn't have a recipe is because they've already started on items, and Hapn, who forgot to buy one at the start of the game. So Xibalba Storm are looking to round things out with their draft, on their builds, excuse me. And they're starting to look at Phoenixes as well. And we mentioned a little bit about the Thoth and how good they are first game. Can Nayhoo replicate something like that with the Raijin here?
Possibly. We have seen a lot of combinations with that Raiju to really spread the damage out. Now, it's not the similar sort of poke as Thoth where you can really lock down one target, but you can dish out real spread damage. But one thing I do want to note here is the Xibalba Storm are looking to wait here on this left-hand side for this Titan to push up, but the Sages can't do much if the Titan does make it. I would have liked to see Grave continue split pushing on the right-hand side of the map. It would have been a real threat, might have forced back someone like Ratmilk or Tegveer to have to defend that Phoenix. Instead, Grave decides to play it defensively and has opted to match everyone out. But it's not a full 5-on-5 in the balance here because of that Titan coming down the left-hand side. As soon as that Titan hits the Phoenix line, it's all over on the defense for the Sages.
Could very well be here. Ultimates and zoning are going to be very important for the Athenian Sages. Can Grave and Snaddy get into the back line when Hapn is still around? Like you said, this Titan starts making its way in. Out comes the Dharmic Pillar. Snaddy blinks into the back line and just about manages to juke away. It's a lot of damage pushed out. But the Xibalba Storm back up, and they go straight back in. Huge Fear No Evil discombobulates the entire fight. The Titan gets driven back, but the Phoenix falls in response as well. And that's all the Xibalba Storm needed. Such great play. They bait members in, force out ults, and then immediately fall back because they know, like you said, they have that Titan to do the damage, and that's all they needed.
Yeah, there is nothing you can do about that situation. Or it is everything in favor of the Xibalba Storm because that Titan, that honorary 6th man of the team, will do one thing. It's going to walk into the Phoenix and it's going to start hitting it down. It was full health walking in, and the Sages are in a total catch-22. They either take a fight against the Storm to prevent them from burning down the Phoenix, or they commit onto the Titan. And either one of those results in a Phoenix going down, and it all depends on what happens after the fact. Now, the Sages do manage to keep themselves alive. They don't lose too many relics, at least not relics off of everyone. So they can at least stand up and contend this next Fire Giant. But I do feel like they had to get more active there. It was very clear what the Xibalba Storm were doing it, and the Athenian Sages just let it happen. You can't watch the other team play Smite while you just play on the defense, but here go the Xibalba Storm again.
Again, Snaddy's the first one in, eating a lot of damage, and the CC is just too good! Honorary 6th member from the Fire Giant this time. Xibalba Storm bait members in. It's always Snaddy. Snaddy's always the first one in, and every single time, Hapn is just putting a silence on them and saying, haha, you do nothing. You have no way to stop this. And no one else on the Athenian Sages is going forward. Evermed can't do that kind of thing. Grave can't afford to go in first. And the last time we saw DonutDoug go in that early was because he was like one of the only members left on the team.
Look, if I'm Snaddy there, I am furious with my team. You've got to follow up your Kukulkan there. If he's going in, if he's taking all of that attention, you have to make something of it. But here comes the Storm yet again.
As Evermed, this time the one who's forced out. And it's Hapn doing such good control, zoning out these frontline, just making it so they cannot push the buttons the way they want. And now they may not get a chance to do it at all as Ratmilk blinks on round the backside, finds DonutDoug, There's a beautiful work there, and Nayhoo gets clipped by Spirit, but in the 9 wins. Snaddy now around the backside. Grave finds Ratmilk.
Whoa.
Big knockup for Snaddy, but again, just getting controlled by Hapn the entire time.
Yeah, lockdown in place. They do finally manage to take down Ratmilk to the Athenian Sages, but it's just the one pick. Now, does this mean that the Storm are dissuaded from the Fire Giant? Absolutely.
Hell no.
But will anything dissuade Snaddy from going in yet again? Could he at least get some assistance? Looks like Graves
Nope.
up.
No, he cannot. He walks in, gets silenced, and that's it. There is no way that Snaddy can afford to push up like that. They have been completely and utterly manhandled this entire set. Not even just this game.
Yeah, it's been really tough for Snaddy to get involved so far. Like I said, I think you need more backup from the rest of your front line. Evermed, not able to close the distance. Grave gets up onto the World Tree, but can't get close enough either. And yeah, it's unfortunate for the Sages, but they've just allowed for this to happen. The Storm walk in, take down yet another Phoenix, and now they're going to look to just reset and do it all again on the right-hand side of the map. It's been clinical from the Xibalba Storm when they've needed it. There's been some chaotic fights, and the fights when they've been crazy have still benefited them. But when it comes to sieging up, the Storm have pretty much played it perfectly. They are playing it slowly, just like they did in game number 1. They are walking up, drawing the Sages in, taking the opportunities that get handed to them, and then just taking down those objectives when they need to. I'm expecting now the Sages to struggle to defend this left and mid Phoenix. Now, the left one is coming up at a good time for them, but look at the 3k pots coming out from the Storm. We're seeing GIobe again connecting with these ultimates finally. It's going to be very, very tough now to defend if you are the Storm. At least they have the benefit of Grave on this Ratatoskr with that semi-global ultimate to maybe clear the left-hand waves or the mid waves and then make this rotation to the right-hand side. But the Storm are getting frisky here, but they're pushing up on the left side jungle.
Makes sense for them. They want to keep that pressure where they have it. Warding from Athenian Sages and just having people in the lane. They know this is happening. Graves around the side. Tegveer is looking for a rotation in. They do TP over, like you said, round the back. Snaddy is. Some big ultimates go a fly in. Half health.
No.
And DonutDoug gets taken down. The Serpent and the 9 wins late game have done so much for them. And now they get to live because of the alternate timeline. Grave can't answer back. 4 members fall down, make it a full deicide. Xibalba Storm have shown up massively, taking down the Athenian Sages. It's a deicide, and in just under an hour, they will take the set 2-0, Judas.
Absolutely clean and clinical. The Xibalba Storm really came to play today. I'm not sure what we were expecting, but it wasn't that. It was a really easy matchup for them there. I think finally we saw Snaddy go in and Grave follow it up. They finally get on top of this Kukulkan, and what do you know? He's got that alternate timeline built in. And it just wasn't enough. We see Tegveer get the triple kill, and Poseidon had the space to put out that consistent damage, and it was just clean. It looked really neat and tidy. I think if anyone's coming prepared for this group, they need to really keep their eyes on the Xibalba Storm.
They certainly do, and to break down just what we saw with a fine-tooth comb, let's go back over to J-Mac and Mifflin on the desk. Xibalba Storm take the set. Let's find out how they did it.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's right, Xibalba Storm, a 2-0 over the Athenian Sages, and well, you said at the end of game number 1, and we'll just go ahead and repeat it here, Mifflin. It's Ratmilk world, and we're just living in it. This time, though, with a little bit of extra help from Tegveer. 7-2 for the both of them on this Batz Poseidon combo. Made a devastating do in the solo lane throughout the entirety of this game, whether it be Poseidon getting some early kills throughout the starting portions of this one. That last team fight, Tegveer really coming in clutch with the Whirlpools, these Krakens, really kind of keeping the fights interesting. And then this Batz, every time we see one, all it takes is one Fear No Evil to really turn the tide of a fight.
Man, I do got to shout out Tegveer, though. Particularly, I believe it was around that 18-minute mark or so where we had saw the Ratatoskr rotate through his lane, and Tegveer nearly turns it around into a double kill. Doesn't get anything, but knocks both down to about sub 10% HP. It was at that point where I thought to myself, yeah, this is not looking so good for the Athenian Sages. The Xibalba Storm was just playing through so much momentum at that point, and a great composition for it. I mean, when you look at it, we had neglected to say it during the draft, but this is a great draft for just burning objectives. They've got the secure, they've got the burn potential. Tegveer on Poseidon can absolutely shred a fire giant. Hapn is literally shredding a fire giant with Dharmic Pillars, and then all the while you've got either GIobe or Tegveer with their ultimates to secure those objectives. All issues that I think Athenian Sages found themselves running into in a lot of those engagements was, even if we can get into the Fire Giant pit, even if we can get into the Gold Fury pit, how exactly are we going to generate enough threat to get these guys off of it? And they never quite found the answer, and I'm not sure that their composition exactly had that. All the while, the Athenian Sages, though, were trying their best to dive that back line. Unfortunately for them, the Xibalba Storm just a little bit too slippery back there, and not enough damage on that dive for the Sages to hit pay dirt for the most part. So Xibalba Storm came with a clear strategy, executed on it very well, and then individually, as we've been harping on constantly, Ratmilk and Tegveer just putting on a show.
I think another important thing is just the amount of no play zone that the Xibalba Storm had to work with. Are you going to want to walk through a Tornado Lake game against this full build Kukulkan? Absolutely not. Do you want to walk through a Dharmic Pillar? I don't want to touch that thing at any point. Fear no evil, that giant circle that nobody's allowed to really play in. And then there's always that threat of the Kraken or a Whirlpool dropped down by Tegveer to really just block off so many different avenues and be such an interruptive factor. I mean, between just the Ganesha and the Poseidon, few of these characters absolutely miserable. Evermed's not going to be able to dash anywhere on this Charon if there's a silence nearby or there's a Whirlpool under his feet. Same thing with Snaddy on this Kukulkan, where it wasn't able to quite get into the backline enough. Made it nice and easy, at least in the early to mid game, but once you get to that late game, this warrior wasn't able to quite get as much out there for the side of the Athenian Sages. So, what does this at least mean for these two teams now? Well, Xibalba Storm, they find themselves a win. They move into the upper bracket. I believe they'll face off against the Valhalla Valkyries for themselves. Athenian Sages not out of the tournament just yet. It's the important part of this first day is you're not out of the brackets just yet. You still have a second opportunity due to the nature of having a double elimination matchup.
Yeah, so if you're big fans of them, don't go anywhere. They'll be back. Not today, though. Today's for the first matchups, and we'll have an opportunity to look at the bracket here in a moment. I'm really excited to go forward, and I know there are some big names coming up as well.
Yeah, you look over at who the Xibalba Storm is going to have to face off against for their winners bracket side. Valhalla Valkyries, the #1 seed from the North American SCC, I believe undefeated this past phase. So we'll have to see how the Xibalba Storm, who again came into this one as one of the lower seeded teams, I believe the 6th seed for this matchup, now having to face against the #1 in their own division. Then for Sages, they'll have to play against Cat Club, at least on the lower end of the bracket. We do have a whole other side to it that continues at least for the remainder of our day, because we still have one more match to go, and that will be the Aru Scorpions and the Chulainn Wardens, where on paper, this is probably one of our closer matchups, a 3rd seed and a 5th seed for these two teams. Chulainn Wardens, at least looking at some of the names on this roster, you have players that have been around for the scene for quite some time. Elion notably sticks out for me in the support role here for the Chulainn Wardens. You throw over onto the side of the Aru Scorpions, you have Gino and Relentless One. The brothers throwing at it again for another squad, so we'll have to see which of these ones can come out on top. Again, that'll be another best of 3 matchup for them. Winner faces against Tyrian Weavers. Loser drops down to face off against the SOC team. And that's I'll be honest, this might be the toughest side of the two groups. I don't think as many people were expecting that level of performance out of Oblivion earlier on that we got to see today. Could make for a very fun side of this bracket.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one. But, J-Mac, I can't help but notice you neglected to bring up maybe one of the biggest rising stars we've got in this tournament. Nog out of mid.
Yeah.
I am bought in on this guy's hype. Every time I get an opportunity to speak to some of these SEC dudes or even the SPL guys, who's some talents that are absolutely dominating ranked right now? Who should I be keeping my eyes on? Who's really stepping up? So many of them are just talking about Nog. I'm not personally at an MMR range where I've been a victim of Nog myself, but if the hype's to be believed, this guy is the real stuff.
Well, let's see if we can buy into that hype, because the Chulainn Wardens and the Aru Scorpions, our final match of the day, coming up right after this break.
There's nothing wrong with that. Tripping, yeah, we all lose track. I wouldn't mind it if I find it. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't have to be an acrobat. I wouldn't mind it. Should I find it? All my life, up and down, but always comes back to you. Didn't ask for any favors. It seems too late. Love is strong, but some things you